Hello and welcome back to Reddit Whispers. It's strange, isn't it, how a single sentence can dismantle 20 years of shared history, reduce a lifetime of memories to ashes, and leave you standing in the ruins of what you thought was an unshakable fortress. My name is Ethan, and until very recently I believed I had it all. A loving wife, Sarah, two wonderful children, Liam and Chloe, a comfortable home in the suburbs of Calgary, and a life that, while not without its challenges, felt genuinely fulfilling. We met in our early 20s, fresh out of university, both eager and a little naive about the world. Sarah, with her vibrant red hair and a laugh that could light up a room, had captivated me from the moment I saw her across the crowded university library. I was a quiet engineering student, more comfortable with equations than emotions, but she had a way of drawing me out, of making me feel seen and understood in a way no one ever had before. Our early years were a whirlwind of youthful passion and discovery. We navigated the complexities of first jobs, rented our first tiny apartment, and dreamed endlessly about the future. We talked about travel, about careers, about the kind of family we wanted to build. Those conversations, filled with hope and a boundless sense of possibility, became the bedrock of our relationship. We married 5 years after we met, a small ceremony surrounded by close friends and family, and I remember looking at her that day, bathed in the soft glow of the Alberta sun, and feeling an absolute certainty that this was my person, my forever. We built our life together brick by brick, each year adding another layer of shared experiences, inside jokes, and unspoken understandings. We bought our first house, a charming but slightly dilapidated bungalow that we slowly transformed into a home. I remember countless weekends spent painting walls, laying new flooring, and arguing good-naturedly over the placement of furniture. We supported each other through career changes, through the anxieties of promotions and the sting of setbacks. When my father passed away, it was Sarah who held me, who allowed me to grieve without judgment, who reminded me to eat and sleep even when I felt like I couldn't. And when her mother battled a serious illness, I was there, a steady presence by her side, a silent promise to face whatever came our way together. Our children, Liam and Chloe, arrived a few years apart, bringing with them a new dimension of love and chaos to our lives. I remember the overwhelming surge of emotion, the sheer protectiveness I felt holding Liam for the first time, and then again with Chloe. Parenthood brought its own set of challenges, sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, the constant juggle of work and family life, but we tackled them as a team. Sarah was an incredible mother, patient and nurturing, always putting our children first. I tried my best to keep up, to be a present and involved father, to contribute equally to the demanding task of raising two happy, well-adjusted kids. We had our routines, our traditions. Sunday morning pancakes, Friday night movie marathons, summer vacations to the Okanagan or the Rockies. These weren't grand, extravagant gestures, but rather the quiet, consistent rhythms that formed the soundtrack of our married life. They were the threads that wove us together, creating a tapestry of shared history that felt rich and unbreakable. We'd weathered storms, big and small, financial worries, arguments over household chores, disagreements about parenting styles. But we always came back to each other stronger and, I believed, more deeply connected. We had a way of communicating, even when words failed us. A glance, a touch, a shared silence, these were our private language, the shorthand of two souls intimately intertwined. I often thought about how lucky I was, to have found someone who truly saw me, who accepted my flaws, and who celebrated my successes with genuine joy. Sarah wasn't just my wife. She was my best friend, my confidant, the anchor in my often turbulent world. I trusted her implicitly, with every fiber of my being. There was never a moment, not a single flickering doubt, that she wouldn't be by my side through thick and thin until the very end. We were a unit, an indivisible whole, or so I thought. The evening it happened, it was a Tuesday. Sarah had been a little quiet all day, I'd noticed, but I'd attributed it to a particularly stressful week at work for her. She was a marketing manager, and deadlines often left her drained. I'd cooked dinner, my famous lasagna, a family favorite, and the kids were upstairs doing homework. The house was filled with the comforting hum of domesticity, the kind of quiet background noise that signifies a life well lived and well loved. After dinner, we were in the living room. I was half watching a hockey game and Sarah was on the sofa, scrolling through her phone. I remember glancing over at her, thinking how beautiful she still was, even after all these years. Her red hair, though streaked with a few silver threads now, still held its vibrant fire, and her smile, when it came, could still disarm me completely. I asked her if she was okay, if anything was bothering her. She put her phone down slowly, deliberately. She looked at me and her expression was one I'd never seen before. A mix of sadness, resignation, and something else, something akin to fear. My heart gave a little lurch. "Ethan," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "we need to talk." Those words, so common, so innocuous in another context, felt like a lead weight in my stomach. I turned off the TV, my attention now entirely on her. I braced myself for bad news, a problem with the kids, a work crisis, a health scare. Anything but what she actually said. She took a deep breath, her gaze meeting mine, unwavering. I want another man." The words hung in the air, suspended, heavy, and utterly devastating. They weren't a question, not a plea, but a statement of fact, delivered with a chilling finality. For a moment my mind simply refused to process them. It was as if she had spoken in a foreign language, one I couldn't comprehend. Another man. The phrase was so alien, so utterly out of place in our carefully constructed world. I felt a cold dread seep into my veins, starting in my chest and spreading outwards, numbing me. I must have looked utterly bewildered because she continued, her voice gaining a fragile strength. "I'm sorry, Ethan, I really am, but I've fallen in love with someone else. I want to be with him." And in that instant, my entire world shattered. The carefully built fortress of our 20 years together crumbled into dust, revealing the terrifying emptiness beneath. Everything I believed, everything I held dear, every shared memory, every whispered promise, every silent understanding, it all dissolved into a cruel illusion. The comfort, the certainty, the absolute trust I had in our life, in her, in us, it was all gone. Replaced by a gaping void, a profound sense of betrayal that was both physical and emotional. I felt a visceral punch to the gut, a wave of nausea washing over me. It was as if I'd been living a meticulously crafted lie for 2 decades, and only now, with her stark confession, had the curtain been pulled back to reveal the hollow stage beneath. The pain was immediate and all-consuming, a sharp, searing agony that left me breathless. It wasn't just the pain of losing her, though that was immense. It was the pain of losing my past, of having my history rewritten in an instant, of realizing that the foundation I had built my entire adult life upon was nothing more than quicksand. The man I thought I was, the life I thought I had, it was all a mirage, shimmering and then vanishing, leaving me stranded and utterly alone in a desolate landscape of my own making. The immediate aftermath of her confession was a blur of fragmented moments, a jarring descent into a reality I couldn't comprehend. My mind, usually so logical and ordered, simply shut down, refusing to process the seismic shift that had just occurred. I remember staring at Sarah, my wife of 20 years, as if she had suddenly transformed into a stranger. Her face, usually so familiar, so open to me, was now a mask of sorrow and something I couldn't quite decipher, a kind of weary determination, perhaps. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. My throat felt constricted, my lungs refused to draw breath. It was a physical paralysis, a complete systemic shock. She waited patiently, her eyes fixed on me, and in that gaze I saw a history of unspoken things, a narrative unfolding that I had been utterly oblivious to. "Ethan, please say something," she finally pleaded, her voice cracking. "Anything." But what was there to say? How do you respond to a declaration that obliterates your entire existence? How do you articulate the sensation of watching your life unravel before your very eyes, piece by agonizing piece? My silence, I'm sure, was more eloquent than any words I could have mustered. It spoke of profound shock, of an unbearable wound that had just been inflicted. Finally, a single guttural sound escaped my lips. "Who?" It was barely a whisper, ragged and raw. She flinched as if the word itself was a physical blow. He's a colleague, she said, her voice dropping to an even lower register. From work, his name is David. David. The name hung in the air, a concrete symbol of my newfound despair. Not a faceless concept, but a man with a name, a presence, a reality that had already intertwined with my wife's life in a way I could fathom. A colleague. How many times had she mentioned him casually? In passing conversations about office politics, project deadlines, team meetings. I had paid no mind, of course. Why would I? He was just another person in her professional life, an incidental detail. The thought made my stomach churn with a fresh wave of nausea. All those times he was there, a growing shadow I hadn't seen, slowly, insidiously, taking root in the fertile ground of my marriage. How long? I managed, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. She hesitated, her gaze dropping to her hands, which were clasped tightly in her lap. A few months, seriously. But I've felt a disconnection for longer, Ethan. I just didn't know how to talk about it. A few months, seriously. That phrase was a dagger to my heart. Seriously. As if the casual flirtation had progressed to something more, something real, something that now eclipsed 2 decades of my life. And the disconnection. Had I been so blind, so complacent, so utterly self-absorbed that I hadn't seen the cracks forming? The thought was a bitter pill to swallow. I prided myself on being attentive, on being present. But clearly, I had failed on a catastrophic level. I stood up, feeling a sudden surge of restless energy, a need to move, to escape the suffocating weight of her words. I walked to the window, staring out at our perfectly manicured backyard, at the swing set where Liam and Chloe had spent countless hours, at the small vegetable patch Sarah had cultivated with such care. It all looked the same, yet it was irrevocably changed, tainted by the revelation that had just shattered our carefully constructed domestic bliss. The silence in the room stretched, thick and oppressive, punctuated only by the frantic drumming of my own heart. I wanted to scream, to rage, to demand explanations, to tear down the walls of the house with my bare hands. But what would be the point? The words had been spoken, the truth laid bare. There was no going back, no unhearing what she had just said. I need to think, I finally choked out, my voice rough with unshed tears. I can't process this right now. She nodded, her face etched with pain. I understand, I'll sleep in the guest room tonight. And that was it. The first tangible step in the dismantling of our shared life. The physical separation, a precursor to the emotional and legal one that was surely to follow. I heard her quietly gather some things, heard the soft click of the guest room door. Then, silence. A profound, echoing silence that was far more deafening than any argument or raised voice could have been. I stayed by the window for what felt like hours, watching the moon rise over our once happy home, feeling its cold, indifferent light mock my shattered reality. My mind began to race, replaying every moment of our 20 years together through a new, horrifying lens. Every loving glance, every shared laugh, every intimate touch, were they all just part of a grand performance? Had she been living a lie, or had her feelings for me simply faded? The latter thought was almost more painful. The idea that our love, once so vibrant and strong, could simply wither and die without me even noticing, spoke of a deep-seated negligence on my part, a failure to nurture the very foundation of our relationship. I thought of our children. Liam, 15, and Chloe, 12. How would this affect them? Their stable, loving home, their perception of their parents, it would all be shattered. The thought of inflicting that pain on them, on my innocent children, was almost unbearable. They were the truest, most precious part of our life together, and now, even they would be caught in the fallout of our crumbling marriage. The night was endless. Sleep was an impossibility. I wandered through the house, a ghost in my own home, touching familiar objects, a framed wedding photo, a drawing Chloe had made for me in kindergarten. The worn armchair where Sarah and I would curl up to read, each one a bittersweet reminder of a life that no longer existed, a future that had been irrevocably altered. The next few days were a blur of strained interactions, hushed conversations, and an agonizing distance that had opened up between us. Sarah maintained her calm, almost detached demeanor which only fueled my confusion and anger. How could she be so composed when my world was in freefall? Her composure felt like another betrayal, a testament to the fact that she had already processed this, had already moved on, while I was still trapped in the agonizing present. We decided, for the sake of the children, to keep things as normal as possible for a while. A futile attempt, I knew, but one we both felt was necessary. But the normalcy was a fragile facade, easily shattered by a fleeting glance, a forgotten touch, the painful awareness of her absence from our marital bed. I tried to talk to her to understand. "What happened, Sarah? Where did we go wrong?" I pleaded one evening, my voice raw with despair. "Was it something I did, something I didn't do?" She looked at me, her eyes filled with a profound sadness. "It's not about blame, Ethan. It's not about you being a bad husband or me being a bad wife. It's it's about me and what I need and what I'm not getting from our marriage anymore. I've changed, we've changed, and I've fallen in love with someone who sees those changes, who connects with me in a way I haven't felt in years." The words were like a surgeon's scalpel, dissecting my heart, laying bare the truth of her emotional departure. "What you need," I countered, a bitter edge to my voice. "What about what we need? What about our family, our 20 years?" She just shook her head, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I know, Ethan, and I'm so sorry. This isn't easy for me either, but I can't deny how I feel anymore." Her certainty was devastating. It wasn't a fleeting infatuation, not a temporary crisis. This was a deep-seated conviction, a decision she had clearly wrestled with and ultimately made, and there was nothing I could do to change it. Nothing I could say, no plea I could make, no memory I could invoke that would sway her from this path she had chosen. The realization was a crushing blow. I was powerless. The man who had always felt capable, strong, and in control was now utterly adrift, unable to navigate the treacherous waters of his own collapsing life. The illusion of my life, the stable, happy existence I had taken for granted, had evaporated, leaving behind a stark and desolate landscape. The emptiness was vast, and I felt utterly lost within it, a ghost in the ruins of my own making, grappling with the agonizing question of how to rebuild when the foundation itself had been so completely, irrevocably destroyed. The initial shock eventually gave way to a relentless, grinding pain that permeated every aspect of my existence. It wasn't just sadness. It was a profound sense of disorientation, as if the compass of my life had been spun wildly off course. My routines felt hollow, my interactions with the world superficial. I moved through my days in a fog, a specter haunting the remnants of my former life. The kids, bless their innocent hearts, sensed the shift immediately. Liam, always the more observant, would look at me with worried eyes, his usual boisterous energy subdued. Chloe, more outwardly emotional, would often ask, "Mommy, Daddy, why aren't you guys laughing anymore?" My heart would ache with every question, every unspoken plea in their gazes. We tried our best to reassure them, to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but the tension in the house was a palpable thing, a silent scream that echoed in every corner. Sarah and I began the painful, tedious process of separating our lives. We still lived under the same roof, for the time being, a strange and unbearable dance of two people who were once intimately connected, now navigating each other with the cautious distance of strangers. We discussed logistics, who would take the kids to school, who would manage dinner, who would sleep where. Each conversation was a fresh incision, laying bare another layer of the wound that festered between us. The house, once filled with the warmth of our shared life, now felt cold and empty, a museum of a love that had died. Every object held a memory, a painful reminder of what we had built and what was now being systematically dismantled. The couch where we watched movies, the kitchen island where we'd helped the kids with homework, the bedroom that once held the intimacy of our marriage, they all became monuments to a past that was slipping further and further away. I started taking long, solitary walks in the evenings, trying to outrun the demons that plagued my mind. The crisp Calgary air, usually invigorating, now felt sharp and biting against my skin. I'd walk for hours, past familiar houses, past families laughing and living their lives, and felt an overwhelming sense of alienation. Their happiness, their normalcy, felt like a cruel mockery of my own shattered reality. I often found myself in a small park near our home, sitting on a bench beneath an ancient maple tree, watching the leaves rustle in the wind. I'd replay Sarah's words over and over again, searching for a hidden meaning, an escape clause, a way to rewind time and prevent this catastrophe. But there was none. Her decision was final, unyielding, and with each replay the agony intensified, transforming into a corrosive anger. Anger at her for her betrayal, for her selfishness, for shattering our family. Anger at myself for being so blind, so trusting, so utterly unprepared for this seismic shift. And beneath the anger, a deep, pervasive sadness that settled into my bones, heavy and suffocating. My work, usually a source of focus and purpose, became a struggle. I'm a structural engineer, a profession that demands meticulous attention to detail and a clear, analytical mind. But my thoughts were constantly fragmented, drifting back to Sarah, to David, to the gaping void in my heart. I'd stare at blueprints, unable to concentrate, my mind replaying conversations, imagining scenarios, torturing myself with the what-ifs and the if-onlys. My colleagues, particularly my close friend and coworker Mark, noticed. Mark, with his gruff exterior and kind heart, had been a sounding board for me throughout our careers. He knew Sarah well, had seen our family grow. One afternoon, he found me staring blankly at my computer screen. "Ethan," he said, his voice softer than usual. "You're not yourself. What's going on?" The dam broke. I found myself confiding in him, the words tumbling out in a torrent of pain and disbelief. He listened patiently, without judgment, offering the quiet comfort of his presence. "Man, I'm so sorry," he said, shaking his head. That's rough, truly rough." His sympathy, while appreciated, also underscored the finality of it all. It wasn't something to be fixed, not a problem to be solved with engineering precision. This was a deeply human wound, and it would take time, and perhaps scars that would never fully heal. Sarah and I eventually told the children. It was one of the hardest conversations of my life. We sat them down together in the living room, in the same spot where Sarah had delivered her devastating news to me. I remember Liam's eyes, wide with apprehension, and Chloe's lower lip trembling even before we spoke. Sarah, with remarkable composure, explained that sometimes adults grow apart, and that while we would no longer be living together as husband and wife, we would always be their parents and we would always love them fiercely. Liam, true to his nature, asked logical, piercing questions. "Does this mean you're getting divorced? Where will we live? Will we still see both of you?" Chloe, on the other hand, burst into tears, clinging to Sarah, her small body racked with sobs. "I don't want you to leave. I want us to be a family." My heart shattered into a million pieces watching their pain. This was the consequence, the devastating ripple effect of Sarah's decision, of her desire for what she needed. Their innocence, their sense of security was being sacrificed, and the guilt was a heavy, suffocating blanket. We spent the next few hours holding them, comforting them, trying to answer their questions honestly but gently. It was a chaotic, tearful afternoon, a stark reminder that our personal sorrow was not just our own, but was intimately intertwined with the lives of our children. The process of separation and divorce began in earnest. Lawyers, documents, financial disclosures, a cold, clinical dissection of a life built on love and dreams. Each step felt like a betrayal, a further dismantling of something sacred. We argued over assets, over custody arrangements, over the division of property. The person I had loved, the person I had shared everything with, was now an adversary, albeit a reluctant one, in a legal battle that felt both necessary and utterly barbaric. There were moments, fleeting and dangerous, when I almost broke, when the anger consumed me, when the grief became an unbearable weight. I found myself questioning everything I had ever known, every belief I had held about love, loyalty, and commitment. Was it all a lie? Was happiness merely a fleeting illusion, destined to shatter at the cruel whims of fate or the changing desires of another person? The thought was terrifying, leaving me adrift in a world suddenly devoid of meaning. But then I would look at Liam and Chloe, at their resilience, their continued need for my presence, my love, and I knew I couldn't give up. I had to be strong for them, even when I felt utterly weak. I had to navigate this storm, not just for myself, but for the two people who depended on me, who still saw me as their steady anchor. It was a Herculean task, a daily battle against despair and bitterness. The pain was still raw, the wound still fresh, but a tiny flicker of resolve began to ignite within me. a resolve to survive, to rebuild, to somehow find a way forward, even when the path ahead seemed utterly dark and uncertain. It was a fight for my own future, a desperate attempt to reclaim some semblance of my identity, a future that no longer included Sarah but had to include a version of me that was not utterly broken and consumed by the ghost of a love that had once been everything. The immediate aftermath of the separation felt like living in a monochrome world, all the vibrant colors drained from my life. Sarah moved out, taking with her not just her belongings, but a significant portion of the life force that had filled our home. The silence after she left was deafening, a constant reminder of her absence. The kids were with me initially, and the weight of being a single parent, while not entirely new given my prior involvement, felt amplified by the emotional turmoil. Every meal I cooked, every bedtime story I read, every school drop-off, it all felt heavier, infused with a poignant sadness. I saw their longing for their mother, the subtle shifts in their demeanor, the quiet moments when they would look at me with an unspoken question in their eyes, asking why. And I, despite my own pain, had to be the strong one, the unwavering pillar in their suddenly uncertain world. I found solace, surprisingly, in the mundane. The rhythmic push and pull of the vacuum cleaner, the methodical chopping of vegetables for dinner, the quiet contemplation of a new engineering problem at work. These simple tasks, once unremarkable, now offered a temporary escape from the incessant churning of my thoughts. They provided a sense of control in a life that felt utterly out of control. My walks continued, longer and more frequent. I discovered new paths, ventured further into the vast network of Calgary's parks and pathways. The physical exertion, the crisp, clean air, the sheer act of putting one foot in front of the other became a form of therapy. I'd listen to podcasts, to audiobooks, anything to fill the emptiness in my head, to drown out the echoes of what had been. One evening, after a particularly draining day at work and a tearful phone call with Chloe, who missed her mom, I found myself sitting on that same park bench under the maple tree. The leaves had turned now, a fiery riot of reds and golds, a stark contrast to the barrenness I felt inside. I looked up at the vast Canadian sky, streaked with the dying light of the setting sun, and for the first time in months I allowed myself to truly feel the depth of my despair. The tears came then, hot and unbidden, a deluge of grief, anger, and profound sadness. I cried for the loss of my marriage, for the shattered illusion of my future, for the pain my children were enduring. I cried for the man I used to be, the man who believed in forever, in unwavering love. It was a cathartic release, a necessary emptying of the well of sorrow that had been brimming within me. When the tears finally subsided, I felt a strange lightness, a tiny, almost imperceptible shift in the heavy burden I had been carrying. It wasn't happiness, not by any stretch of the imagination, but it was a moment of clarity, a quiet understanding that I couldn't remain a prisoner of my past. I had to find a way to move forward, not just for my kids, but for myself. The process of rebuilding was slow, arduous, and often punctuated by setbacks. There were days when the pain felt fresh again, when a random song on the radio or a forgotten photograph would send me spiraling back into despair. But each time, I found a way to pull myself back, to remind myself that this was my new reality, and I had to learn to navigate it. I started seeing a therapist, a kind and insightful woman named Dr. Evelyn Carter. She didn't offer quick fixes or easy answers, but she provided a safe space to talk, to process my emotions, to untangle the complex web of grief, anger, and confusion. She helped me understand that my feelings were valid, that betrayal was a profound wound, and that healing was a journey, not a destination. Through therapy, I began to unpack the narrative of our 20 years together. I started to see, with brutal honesty, that while I had been a devoted husband, I hadn't always been a present one. I had perhaps become complacent, taking Sarah for granted, assuming our love was an unshakable constant. While her actions were ultimately hers, I acknowledged my own contributions to the growing disconnection she had mentioned. This wasn't about blaming myself. It was about understanding, about learning, about recognizing that relationships, even the strongest ones, require constant nurturing and intentional effort. I started spending more focused, quality time with Liam and Chloe. We started new traditions, just the three of us. Friday night pizza and board game nights became a sacred ritual. We hiked in the mountains, explored new parts of the city, and even tried our hand at baking, with predictably messy but joyful results. I found immense comfort and purpose in their laughter, in their unwavering love, in the simple act of being their father. They were my reason, my motivation, the bright lights in my still-dimmed world. I also reconnected with old friends, people I had perhaps neglected during the intensity of my marriage and family life. Mark, my colleague, remained a steadfast support. I started playing hockey again, a passion I had let slide over the years. The camaraderie of the team, the physical release of the game, provided a much-needed outlet for my pent-up emotions. I even met a few new people, cautiously venturing into social situations that once felt utterly alien. There were still days, many of them, when the emptiness would creep in, when the ghost of Sarah would linger in the corners of my mind. But the moments of light, of genuine connection, of quiet contentment, slowly began to outnumber the moments of darkness. The monochrome world began to regain some of its color, albeit a different palette than before. I learned to cook new recipes, to manage the household finances on my own, to navigate the complexities of co-parenting with Sarah, which, surprisingly, became less fraught over time. We still had our disagreements, but a truce, a fragile understanding began to form, driven by our shared love for our children. I saw Sarah occasionally at school events during handovers of the kids. The raw pain had dulled, replaced by a lingering ache, a quiet sadness for what was lost. I saw her with David once from a distance, and while a pang of something akin to jealousy shot through me, it was quickly followed by a sense of resignation. This was her choice, her path, and I had to find mine. This story isn't about a miraculous recovery, a sudden flash of enlightenment. It's about the slow, painful, yet ultimately hopeful process of rebuilding a life from the ashes of a shattered dream. It's about realizing that even when your world crumbles, you still have the capacity to stand, to breathe, to find new meaning and purpose. It's about understanding that love, in all its forms, continues to exist, even when one particular chapter closes. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I'll ever truly heal from this, or if the scars will always remain. But I do know that I am stronger than I ever thought possible. I am still Ethan, the engineer, the father, the man who once believed in a forever that didn't materialize. But I am also a man who has faced unimaginable loss and found a way to endure, to adapt, to continue building a life, one careful, deliberate step at a time. The illusion of my perfect life may have shattered, but in its place, a new reality is slowly, painstakingly being forged, a reality that is perhaps messier, more uncertain, but undeniably, profoundly my own. Thank you for listening to my story here on Reddit Whispers. Now I want to hear from you. What's the most unexpected, life-changing decision you've ever made when everything seemed to fall apart? Share your thoughts in a comment section, because you never know, you might be the one that someone else needs to hear today.